All right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Emily Hainum. I'm going to be your host tonight. I'm the Executive Director of Student Financial Aid here at Mizzou. Just a quick couple of housekeeping items before we get started and get into the content we have for you tonight. We are going to be recording this. We're going to record it. So if you have to step out for any reason, or if you miss a piece or you want to listen to it again, you're going to have that ability. We're going to send you the link with the recording after the presentation's done. We're also going to be sending out some FAQs that go along with some of the information we're providing. We had a lot of great questions come in before the presentation. And so those are also, we're going to address those. We're not going to be able to address every single question in this presentation, but we're going to address a lot of them. And we have some other upcoming webinars that are going to help out as well, get you some of the answers that you need. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get after it. But just want to go ahead and let you know that the goal of this presentation, aside from our agenda, is we're going to try to build a foundation of terminology, a foundation of information that can help you make the best decision when it comes to your educational expenses. We're going to break down your aid offer letters into steps. We're going to break down the cost of attendance so you understand it a little bit better. And then just understand, though, that financial aid is a very personal and very individual process. So no two students are going to be exactly alike. So if you have more individualized questions, we really want you to reach out to us. We love to talk to students. We love to help students. And so at the end of the day, if you don't get your exact specific question answered here today, hopefully you'll gain a little bit of knowledge. And then come and have a chat with us or email us, and we'll be able to get you the answers that you need. So anyway, so what we're gonna tackle today on our agenda is we're gonna go over some important financial aid terminology. We're gonna define some of those things first, because as we go through the presentation, we're gonna use that terminology and try to help you understand a little bit more what's going on that financial aid offer letter and what those cost of attendance components are. So we're gonna also then go over some frequently asked questions, and then we're just gonna wrap it up and bring it home. So here we go. So important terminology. One of the main things, the very first thing that you should do if you're interested in getting financial aid is complete the FAFSA. And the FAFSA stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. This is a really important application. It helps determine a lot of things for us when it comes to awarding financial aid, and for the federal government, for the state government grants, all those good things. And just remember, it's free. So if you're on a website and they're asking you to pay for something, that's not the correct website. And we'll have the website posted here on a slide in a second. So the cost of attendance, or COA, we're going to use that interchangeably, COA or cost of attendance. So just keep that in mind. We'll define that here in a minute, so you'll have a better idea of what that is. The expected family contribution, that is a score or a number that is basically generated off of what you complete on your FAFSA, the information you input on your FAFSA. It is a federal formula. It's done by federal law. So we're going to explain that a little bit and go through that and how that impacts your financial aid package. The aid offer letter, we're going to go through that letter that you got in the mail. You got it via email. And we're going to look at that total amount of aid that was offered to you, and the cost of attendance and the EFC, and how these things all interact with each other to give you your aid package. And then the remaining need, basically the formula for that, the cost of attendance minus the EFC minus that gift aid that you receive, that financial aid that you receive, essentially is the definition of your remaining need, or that's the formula that we use. So we're going to keep on plugging here. And just real quick, before we dive into some of the details, if you've not already completed that FAFSA, please do so, because that is really the crux of making sure that we can get you the best aid package that we can with the most options. The website's there. Keep in mind, it's an annual application. You need to complete it every year. I really encourage students and families that I talk to put a recurring calendar reminder on their calendar for October 1st, because that's the first day that you can complete the FAFSA for the following aid year. And so it opens up on October 1st, and it goes off of 2-year-old tax data. And so because it goes off that 2-year-old tax data, you're able to complete it as soon as October 1st. And that's just really important. Honestly, any school you're going to, the best practice is to complete the FAFSA as soon as possible for the following academic year. That's going to put you in the best position to get the best aid package as soon as possible. So, and then just keep in mind that every school has different priority deadlines, and pay attention to what those priority deadlines are and make sure you get that FAFSA in by those priority deadlines to, again, make sure you're getting the best aid package that you can. Okay, so cost of attendance, or COA. Let's dive into this a little bit. So what is the cost of attendance? Because it's a term that's thrown out there a lot, but what is it really? And so the cost of attendance it's a federal thing. It's basically a federal law that we have to put together what it costs for a student to attend Mizzou for one academic year. And so it's an average cost. It's not the exact cost that every single student is going to incur, but on average, this is what we're estimating it's going to cost for you to attend Mizzou. And so what goes into that cost of attendance are direct costs and indirect costs. And we're going to do a deep dive into both of those categories. But those two things make up, those two categories of elements of this cost of attendance are what makes up all of the costs that we're associating with you attending Mizzou for one academic year. So, and that's what we refer to as the COA. And you'll also hear us commonly refer to it as a student's budget, because it also sets the maximum amount of aid that a student can receive generally. All right, so cost of attendance, what are the elements that go into that? Well, we just talked about direct and indirect. So let's talk about direct costs first. So direct costs are the expenses shown on your student bill that is paid directly to Mizzou. Okay, so things like your tuition and fees. And if you're living in Mizzou owned, university owned on-campus housing and signing up for a dining plan and so for your meals. So it's room and board or housing and meals, whatever you want to call it. Those things that are being billed directly to your student account, those are what we mean by direct costs. And we often get asked, well, what all goes into the tuition fees? What are my actual charges for tuition and fees going to cost? And we're gonna talk about this on multiple slides, but right here, right now, I just wanted to go ahead and throw out there that we estimate the cost of attendance. The majority of our students take around 14 hours per term. So if you take 14 hours per term, that's what we're putting into our cost of attendance. That's what we're estimating it will cost between your per credit hour rate for tuition and your mandatory and required course fees. And we're going to go into more detail about that, but I just wanted to go ahead and call that out because that's a really common question we get. And I just want to go ahead and get ahead of the curve on that one. The other categories that we talked about are indirect costs. So these are expenses that are not paid directly to Mizzou, but are estimated expenses that are necessary for you to attend. So basically what the Department of Education in the federal government, I mean, Congress is asking us to do is to put together, so you're not caught off guard as a student by these other expenses that you're going to incur while you're a student at Mizzou. So things like books and supplies, those are going to be different for everybody, and they're not necessarily always billed through your student bill. They might be, but they don't have to be. Transportation expenses, so that's transportation to and from home, to and from your permanent home. That's what we're estimating in there. Off-campus housing and meals. So if you live in non-university housing, if you're living in an apartment off campus at some point in your college career, that's what we're considering an indirect cost, because again, those costs can vary for student. And then personal and miscellaneous expenses. And so those are just basically your normal living expenses. And we're going to go through some examples on a later slide of that. All right, so expected family contribution. We get a ton of questions about this, and we understand how frustrating that this number can be for some people because it's hard to understand everything that goes into the calculation. But just understand or know that it is a formula that's automatically calculated based upon that information you complete on the FAFSA, and it is governed by federal law. So we can't change what goes into that calculation. We're not allowed to do that. So some basics around it, some basics around the EFC is we're factoring in a student's financial need. We use it, I we're going to talk more about the financial need calculation, but we've basically talked about it a little bit already. And it's a gauge. It's meant to gauge the family's ability, between the parents and the student, their ability to help pay for college expenses for the student. It drives award eligibility. We're going to talk more about that. And I mentioned it briefly, but it's based upon prior tax year information. So what that means is it's based on 2-year-old tax information. So if your finances have changed significantly, if a parent has lost a job, or 2 parents have lost a job, if potentially a divorce, if unfortunately if there's a death in the family, any types of things where your family's finances have changed significantly, that's when you should reach out to our office, and we will review your situation and we will compare it to what you input in the FAFSA initially, and what your current situation is, and we'll be able to see if there's anything that we can do to adjust it. But just please understand that those types of adjustments are very few and far between, and it really takes a significant shift in income in order for that to really make a difference. So, but it is an option, and if you have any questions on it, we welcome those questions, and we really do want you to reach out to us so we can help you and talk you through the process. So we talked a little bit about the remaining need calculation briefly when we were going through the terminology, but this is the crux or the basics of why cost of attendance and the expected family contribution are so important, because they go into the costs or it goes into the calculation of how we calculate someone's need. So we take that cost of attendance, we subtract out the expected family contribution, we subtract out the gift aid, the financial aid elements that you're getting that are grants, whether it's from feds, the state government, institutional grants, scholarships, anything that's gift aid that you don't have to pay back. And then that's how we get your remaining financial need. So this is the basics of the formula. This is what goes into it. This is what we're looking at when we're packaging a student with their financial aid eligibility. And every award has different terms and conditions. So different awards may be need-based. And so you have to have remaining need in order to keep that award. Or sometimes there are loans that require you to have a remaining need. So we're evaluating all of that by student on a case-by-case basis, and we're putting the best aid package that we're allowed to put together based upon the terms and conditions for each individual aid program. And that's hard because that's what makes financial aid so difficult, because one award could have different conditions versus another one. And sometimes that's hard to understand, and how different aid impacts other pieces of aid in the student package, but we'll talk a little bit more about that. And so the basic then formula for figuring out, because we get a question we get a lot, and a lot of you asked prior to this presentation is, okay, well, just tell me what my out-of-pocket expenses are going to be. Like, forget about all the other expenses, the indirect costs, just tell me what my out-of-pocket expenses are going to be. And we're going to go into a couple examples, but the basic concept that we stick to this formula, the cost of attendance minus the gift aid, which are those scholarships and grants that you're receiving, minus student loans that are taken out in the student's name, minus any parent loans that might be taken out. And that's really, that's the equation. That's what's remaining. The gap that's remaining is those out-of-pocket expenses. A Parent Plus loan can be taken all the way up to the cost of attendance. A private loan can be taken all the way up to the cost of attendance to help fill that gap, but you don't have to. And we'll go into some more details on that as well. But this is it. This is what you should be thinking about when you're trying to decide how to pay for your education and fill that gap. This is the calculation essentially that should be running through your head, and you should be looking at when you're looking at your aid offer letter. This is what we're trying to show you on your aid offer letter. So speaking of that aid offer letter, here's an example of one. It's a screenshot of the top part of the aid offer letter, and two things that I want to just point out to you real quick. I cannot tell you how many times students and families call us thinking that their financial aid offer letter is a bill. So if you don't get anything else out of this presentation, I hope you do get this, that your financial aid offer is not a bill. It is front and center on the top. It's number one listed here on this screenshot. So it is not a bill. Again, we're trying to estimate what your costs are going to be on average, so you can start to make a tentative plan financially. You're never going to know until you actually get your bill what your official costs are, but we are making our best effort to give you the best information that we can about the costs that are associated with attending Mizzou. The other thing, the second thing on this screenshot that I want to call out is we often get asked, well, how do I know what my EFC is? Or how do I know what that expected family contribution is? You can log into your FAFSA and you can look there and see it. But you can also see it on your financial aid offer letter. And it's in this position where number 2 is on this screenshot. So just a couple FYIs there, and we completely understand why it's confusing, and you're getting this piece of paper that talks about costs and talks about your aid and why it can be misconstrued that it's a bill. And there's no shame in that, but we're just trying to help you out now and let you know that it's not a bill. The third thing that I wanted to call out, because we get a lot of questions about this too, is what goes into that tuition, or what is this for sure what I'm actually going to be charged for tuition, and where is that on our financial aid award letter? And again, we talked about it in an earlier slide, but just to re-emphasize, this number that's represented here is our estimate based upon a student taking 14 hours per term, plus mandatory fees, plus course related fees, all put into one to get that number. So if you take less than 14 hours, your tuition and fees might be lower on your actual bill. If you take more than 14 hours, it could be higher. So it could fluctuate since we charge a per credit hour rate. So just keep that in mind. And it also depends on what courses you take, because different courses have different required course fees associated with them. And because we don't know what classes you're in yet, we don't know how many hours you're going to be in, we don't know what courses you're in, it's very hard for us to tell you exactly what your tuition bill is going to be. We're not going to be able to do that until bills come out around mid-July. So, but again, this is a really good estimate for you to work off of and consider when you're making your financial plans and determining whether or not Mizzou's a good fit for you. Okay, direct costs in the aid offer letter. We're going to dive in a little bit deeper. So I kind of just addressed this, but again, I just want to re-emphasize and bring it home that how much your tuition and fees will actually cost is there's 3 elements that go into that tuition and fee actual charges. And again, we charge per credit hour, mandatory fees, and required course fees. Until we know what you're registered in, until that bill, that tuition calculation is actually run by our cashiers team, we're not going to be able to give you a spot on specific amount that you're going to pay for your tuition and fees. But we're going to try to get you as close as we possibly can. And so I've talked a little bit about these things, but the answer to this question is it does depend. It depends if you're an in-state resident or an out-of-state resident. There are different tuition rates for a non-resident of Missouri. The number of credit hours you enroll in impacts your total tuition and mandatory fee costs because we charge per credit hour. And then the different courses that you take will have different required course fees associated with them based upon what it takes for that course to go. So again, these are the factors that go into it. I know it's not a straight answer, or it doesn't feel like it, and I am really sorry for that. I wish that we could give a more simplified answer, but this is the best information that I can give you right now. And just another reminder again, we do allocate your cost of attendance tuition and fee number based upon 14 credit hours per term, because that is what the majority of Mizzou students take at this time. So, all right. And then if you do want to be proactive and go out and calculate your own tuition and fees, I do have the formula here. The number of credit hours times your tuition cost per credit hour plus mandatory and required course fees equals your estimated tuition and fee costs. This is it. This is the secret sauce behind it. Well, I don't know if it's really secret because it's just out here. But anyway, you can go to cashiers.missouri.edu. You can look under the tab that's labeled tuition and fees. It's toward the upper left top of the website. And you can use that drop down and you can get, what I would do is I would encourage you to go out to the cashier's website and just look around, and especially under that tab, and familiarize yourself with the different types of tuition charges and the different fees. That will at least help you start to estimate. And just remember right now that the fees that are listed or posted out there on the cashier's website are actually from this current academic year that we're in, 21-22. The fees for the 22, for the incoming class for fall of 22, those won't be posted until they're approved by the Board of Curators, and that usually doesn't happen until the summer, June-ish. So you will, but again, you have an estimate in your cost of attendance that's pretty accurate. You're going to get a good idea from what's currently out there of the approximate cost, but this is a way for you to go out and do the math and try to make yourself feel a little bit more comfortable about answering that question. Well, what am I really going to get charged? And depending on how many hours you take and the courses you take, you can kind of start to get an idea by perusing that website. All right, housing and meals. If you are living on campus in one of our residence halls, when we put these numbers into our cost of attendance, we are using a weighted average because there are a variety of residence halls and there are a variety of charges that are associated with them. Just a word of caution, keep in mind that the singles and suites can be a bit more expensive. So just be careful with that, or be mindful of that as you're picking your room. It could actually be higher than what we have in your cost of attendance in your aid offer letter. And so if you are, once you do get that housing assignment and you know how much it's going to be, it might behoove you to go to your aid offer letter and manually like cross out the number we have in there and put in the actual number and then redo the math on your aid offer letter just to help you out with planning appropriately for how far your financial aid is going to go with that new housing number. For the meal plan, we default in our cost of attendance to the most popular meal plan that students have, and it's that Tiger Plan Plus. And you have, just so you know, like it's going to default that way, but you can change your meal plan. You can change it up to 5 weeks into the term. I think September 23rd is the deadline for the fall term. So just be mindful of that. You can start changing it as early as May 15th. But September 23rd is that deadline. So you can kind of test it a little bit, get an idea if you need that meal plan or if you need more or less, and make that appropriate adjustment. All right, we're going to get into some examples now. So the example that we have here is, this is the top portion of your estimated cost of attendance off of your aid offer letter. And so what I'll say is, I believe that we sent out the cost of attendance worksheet to you via email prior to this presentation earlier today. If you want, this would be a good time to pull out that sheet, and we're going to go through an example, taking numbers off your aid offer letter and putting it into that sheet to kind of help give you a better estimate based upon some of the common questions that we get. You don't have to, you can always rewatch this and do it another time, or memorize the information and go back and do it when a time is best for you. But ultimately, one of the things we get asked a ton is, I don't want to care about the indirect costs. Tell me what my direct costs are going to be, and help me estimate my aid based upon what the direct costs are versus the indirect. Like, that's just off to the side. So that's what we're going to do in this example. So as you can see there, I have a yellow box in a square around the direct cost, the total of those. And so the cost of attendance worksheet that we provided to you, we take those numbers and we line up the rows with the appropriate corresponding row in the cost of attendance worksheet. And we put them in, we enter them in, and then it's going to the worksheet's going to if you're doing it online, the worksheet's going to automatically total it up for you. If you're not doing it on the computer, that's fine. That's no big deal. You can do the math, like just add those three numbers together, and then that's going to give you your total estimated direct cost of attendance. So those direct cost elements. Okay. And so then to take this example further, as we go down the aid offer letter, there's a section with your estimated financial aid offers. And so I have a label 1 and a label 2 there. And so we're gonna insert those numbers that are on corresponding with 1 and 2 on the cost of attendance worksheet in the next section down on that cost of attendance worksheet that's entitled financial aid. So we're going to input those corresponding numbers, and then that's going to total up the estimated total out-of-pocket need for direct costs. So in this example, the 23 536 is we're subtracting out the 4,500, subtracting out the 5,500 in student loan options, and then that is your remaining estimated out-of-pocket expenses for just the direct costs. Okay, that's really important because we're using this to help us identify, because we get this question a lot, which is why we wanted to go through this example with you all. Okay, so a second example, we're going to do the same thing, but it's just a little bit different because it has some different numbers on it. We're still looking at that cost of attendance worksheet, and then in this example, this student has a combination of grants and scholarships, and they also have 2 loans that are on their financial aid offer letter. And so when we do that and we plug those numbers into the corresponding slots that are representative of 1 and 2 on the cost of attendance worksheet on this slide, we're plugging those numbers in. And for the loans for number 2, you'll notice that I had to do the math of adding the 3,500 plus the 2,000 to get that total 5,500. But when we add those numbers in, then you can see, again, another example of the direct costs having the financial aid option subtracted out. And then you can see the remaining total out-of-pocket estimate for direct costs, for just those direct costs. It does not include the full cost of attendance. I just want to emphasize that. So if you didn't get the worksheet, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're happy to provide that again. We'll send it out again when we send the recording out, but we just wanted to make sure that you were aware of this tool that we have. And because we get this question a lot, it really does help families nail down just the direct cost portion, and we get asked about a lot. So, all right, so we talked a lot about the direct costs. Now we're going to go into the indirect costs and the aid offer letter and answer some questions about those. Okay, so indirect costs. So the indirect costs are your books, supplies, personal expenses, loan fees, transportation. Those are the things that we've already talked about. We've talked about these categories a little bit. The one word of caution that I want to make sure that everybody's aware of, because this sometimes trips up incoming freshmen, is that you got to be careful, because if you go to the bookstore, sometimes you can charge books and supplies, Tiger Tech, through your student account. That's fine. I'm not saying not to do that. That's fine if you want to do that. But it's important that you think about the timing of when you do that. When the financial aid process starts to run, it's usually around 10 days prior to the term starting. And so if that financial aid process runs and you have direct loans or a Parent Plus loan coming back to you as a dispersed refund as a result of your aid exceeds your total charges on your bill, if you charge a book or a supply after those refunds go out, you may end up owing money back to the institution. And sometimes that confuses students. So they got a financial aid refund. They thought everything was set for the term, but they realized, oh man, or maybe you change classes and you need to go get a new book. And so you go to the bookstore and you charge it to your student account, but then you don't realize that you have you need to make sure that you're checking your monthly statements, your bills from the cashier's office, because you could potentially have a charge that's due. So just wanted to point that out or call that out to you as a word of caution, just for the timing of when you charge those books and supplies. It's really important that you still pay attention to bills, even if you've already gotten a refund, because something else could have been added to your student bill, which you would need to then make sure that you take care of. We don't want you to get caught up with a late fee or a bill when you go to try to register for the next semester. Okay, so more about the transportation costs or more about the indirect costs that are not something that would be billed through Mizzou or owed to Mizzou. And things like that are transportation costs. So we're talking about, again, transportation to and from your permanent home, flights, mileage, ride shares, shuttles, car maintenance, that sort of thing goes into that calculation. Personal expenses, we are literally calculating out clothing, toothpaste, entertainment, a modest amount. Everything we calculate and put into the cost of attendance, it is modest but adequate for the student to attend Mizzou. So it's not an extravagant lifestyle, but it is a necessary or modest lifestyle in order to attend Mizzou. So that's how we come up with it. That's really where it becomes really important, and you can see over to the right in the bottom of this slide, budgeting is just so important for students to make sure that their financial aid is going to go far enough to help them, and they don't end up in a position where they've taken out loans all the way up to the cost of attendance, and then they come up short toward the end of the term, and that money doesn't last. So budgeting is really important. We really encourage you to sit down with someone that can help you do that budgeting. If you don't have anyone at home or a good friend or anything, our Office for Financial Success is awesome. Dr. Green and his team would be happy to sit with you and go through just putting a budget together. And some people are afraid to put budgets together because they don't feel like they have money to be budgeted. But you're never going to know that, or never really be able to nail down what you need from a financial aid perspective if you don't put that budget together. And oftentimes we see students who do sit down with our OFS team and put that budget together. They take out less loans because they figure out how to do it without taking out as much loan. So I really encourage that. Again, you can do it on your own by all means, but you don't have to use OFS, but they're a great resource on our campus, and we would love for you to use them to help you with this part of planning for college. All right, so we're going to get into some frequently asked questions really quick. We got a lot of loan questions in the questions that came in prior to the presentation. And what I will say is we have another wonderful presentation coming up on April 7th that is going to get into the nit and gritty and get down into more weeds about student loans and other financial aid options. It's on April 7th. If you haven't already registered, I strongly encourage you to do so, because we're going to get into the answers to all these questions that you're seeing on the screen today. These questions and more we're going to get into in that next webinar. But today, we're just going to answer some common questions that we get. And one of the main thing that we get are what loans are out there? What are the options that are out there to help me and bridge that gap in the expense of going to college? And kind of from left to right is the order for which we see a lot of families take out loans. We definitely encourage you to go for the student to check out the federal direct subsidized or unsubsidized loan route. Those will automatically show up on your financial aid package in an offered status. You do have to actively go out and accept them. And again, we're going to get into more of those details about how to do that, when to do that, all that good stuff in the next webinar. So we strongly encourage you to attend that next webinar. And not every student qualifies for a subsidized loan. So remember, that comes back, subsidized loan is a need-based federal loan. So that goes back to the calculation that we showed earlier in the presentation of whether or not you might be eligible for that. So the Parent Plus loan is another common option that students and families have the ability to utilize. And then private loans are also sometimes a comparable option to a plus loan. So I encourage families to be good consumers in that they go out and look at different options. Don't just go with the one option that is on your aid offer letter, but go out and explore different options. Private loans can sometimes be competitive with Parent Plus loans in terms of interest rates and so forth and so on. And a student or a parent could take out a private loan. Just keep in mind that typically students do have to have a co-signer on a private loan. So that's a little bit more challenging sometimes, the parent still has to be involved in that process. So, and there's more options for loans out there, and I put our website on there that you can go out and explore some more information. But again, we are going to have that other webinar April 7th. It's going to go into more detail about some of these options. And really quick, because we talked about the subsidized and unsubsidized loans, and it's really the most common student loan out there. It's the one that we deal with the most. Here is just a quick chart about how much you can get annually depending on your grade level for those subsidized and unsubsidized loans. So in total, between the two, as a freshman, $5,500, no more of which can be $3,500 in subsidized. And then on down the line there, sophomore $6,500 and $4,500, and then juniors and seniors can get $7,500 and $5,500. So that's just an estimate. So you can kind of plan if you want to extrapolate out for 4 years and try to put together financial aid packages and cost of attendance for 4 years. It is there. These are amounts based upon if the student is a dependent, based upon the federal definition from the Department of Education. Independent students do have different loan limits. And if you are an independent student, don't hesitate to reach out to us or check out our website. You can see some of those rates or those levels, loan limit levels. Federal Parent Plus loan, we get this question a lot. How much can you borrow in a Parent Plus loan? You can borrow up to the total cost of attendance after all the other aid has applied. It's basically the difference of the cost of attendance minus the other aid that the student has received. You don't have to. And it's really important. We get this question all the time. Do I have to take out the amount of the Parent Plus loan that it's saying that I'm eligible for? You absolutely don't. And students don't have to take out the full amount of their sub or unsub loans either. You can decide if you want to accept a certain amount, like because you have a plan, you have a budget, you know that you only need X amount of loan dollars. And we strongly, strongly encourage students not to take out any more loan funds than they need to. Don't just accept the full amount just for accepting the full amount. Make sure you fill out that budget first and see what you really need to help yourself fill that gap. So yeah, and I just talked about budgeting. So, all right, so scholarships and grants, frequently asked questions. All right, so how can I get any more scholarships from Mizzou? And where can I look for more scholarship opportunities? And the next couple of slides, I'm going to go through some of that stuff. So I'm going to skip over these 2 questions for now, but I just wanted to let you know that those are the most common questions we get, and we are going to address them here tonight. Will my financial aid package change if I receive additional scholarships? The answer to that question is it depends. And I know we hate to say it, we know it gets annoying, and people are frustrated with financial aid in general because it's not an easy answer for us to tell that across the board to everybody. Yes, it's going to change. No, it's not. The answer is that it depends on what types of aid that you have in your package. There are certain need-based grants like land grant and MU grant, need-based loans like the subsidized federal direct subsidized loan that depending on if you get additional aid, it could adjust what you're eligible for because your need is being reduced when more aid comes in. And that's the basic reason why that happens. Also, if you're already packaged all the way up to your cost of attendance, then we have to keep you within your cost of attendance in most situations. So if that happens, then it could be that you're getting that additional scholarship or grant, and that's wonderful, and it's actually helping reduce your student loans that you're taking out, or it's helping to enhance your package. We do the best we can to give as much financial aid to every student that we can. Unfortunately, there are certain aid programs that have different terms and conditions, and when you put them together, they don't always, or they're not always able to go in conjunction with each other. So sometimes they overlap, and that's not necessarily always a bad thing, but we also understand sometimes it's a disappointing thing. So, but with all that being said, the best thing to do is to try to get as many scholarships and grants as you can. And when those come in, we're going to evaluate it. We're going to repackage you. You're going to get an updated aid offer letter from us. And you can see what changes were made. And we're happy to talk through those and answer any questions that you have on that. Okay, what is land grant? We get this question often. So the land grant is basically a Pell Promise program to cover tuition and fees for Missouri residents through a variety of aid programs. So between state grants, federal grants, and institutional aid, we are promising to a Pell eligible student that completes their FAFSA by our priority deadline, we are promising to that student that they will get their tuition fees covered through multiple aid programs put together to cover that full tuition and fees. So again, it's a need-based program. So if you do get another institutional scholarship, that institutional aid goes toward helping pay for tuition first, and then land grant comes in and saves the day if there's any gap remaining in your tuition and fees costs. So that's a great question, and we get it a lot. And it's a good program to help Pell eligible students complete their degrees at Mizzou. Can I gain residency? We are going to talk about residency in our another webinar. I believe it's April 21st. Again, if you haven't registered for that, I strongly encourage you to do so. Non-resident students do have the opportunity to gain residency, and there are some benefits to that. And we are going to talk about that in more detail in a later presentation. Okay, so do I have to reapply for scholarships each year? Is there renewal criteria for the automatic merit scholarships? The answer to the first one on the left, you have to reapply. Sometimes, yes, you do. It's really important. We've talked about different terms and conditions for different types of scholarships, different grants. It's really important that when you receive a scholarship, you read about that scholarship or you read about that grant and you know what goes into awarding that and how and the deadlines for reapplying if they're applicable. Sometimes it's just about getting your FAFSA in by the priority deadline every year because that's an annual application. So just keep that in mind and just and you got to study the awards and just make sure that you know what goes into them so you can get the most out of them. The renewal criteria is posted on our website for our automatic scholarships. If you go to our financial aid website and go to the first time college area, you will be able to see what those renewal criteria are. Things that go into renewal criteria for those automatic ones that you get when you come in as an incoming freshman. You got to meet a certain number of credit hours per year. You got to meet a certain GPA, and it's different for different awards. So that's why I'm not actually stating the exact criteria, because again, you got to go out and look at what it is for yours. And then typically there's a maximum amount of time frame that you're allowed to have that scholarship, a maximum number of terms. So just keep that in mind as you're planning and making plans and for scholarships, that those criteria are important, and it's important to study the awards that you're getting and make sure you know what goes into them and what it means to keep them. Okay, so really common types of Mizzou financial aid sources: automatic merit and competitive scholarships. These are awarded at the time of admission based upon your high school information that you submitted, or if you're a transfer, based upon your transfer academic record. The academic units on our campus or academic departments, they also have scholarships. Those are awarded based upon students completing the applications in Scholarship Universe. I would encourage you every year to go in and reapply annually by our priority deadline that's published on our website, and just keep paying attention to that priority deadline and make sure you get, honestly, when you go to complete the FAFSA, I would go and complete Scholarship Universe as well. Get it all out of the way, put a calendar reminder on so you're never behind the curve when it comes to applying for scholarships. Right now, the majority of our freshman scholarships have been awarded at this time from academic units. There may be a few that are still trickling onto packages, and if they are, you will get an email with an updated aid offer letter and the information on that scholarship. But just keep in mind that the majority of things are out there already. And if they're not, if your automatic ones from admissions are not on there, or if you don't see anything from an AU at this point, just keep in mind that they're like at this point you don't qualify for them, or you have not been selected for those scholarships. So, but again, if you have questions, don't hesitate to give us a call, and we're happy to answer those and help you through the process. Other things we talked about, need-based grants, the land grant and the MU grant are both need-based awards, and they're awarded at the time of admission based upon the, land grant can be awarded any year if you become Pell eligible, but MU grants awarded based upon when you enroll and at the time of admission, and we calculate that award out, and then you receive that going forward if you continue to qualify for it. Okay, external sources from we just wanted to throw out some information here for you, some websites, some other things that you can search for entities outside of Mizzou. And so this is informational, and again, we're gonna these are on our website, and we're gonna have this sent to you, so I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on this slide, but it's there for you to check out other searches and other ways to help you find sources to help you pay for college. All right, so next steps. One of the things I strongly encourage you to do is get familiar with Mizzou One. You can make an appointment with your financial advisor, or you can go here to accept decline loans. You can log into your student account. This is like a one-stop area that's really helpful for students. Like, it's one place where you can pretty much get everything done as a student. And so we strongly encourage you to get familiar with that and go out and check it out. You can also make financial aid appointments through MU Connect. As you get more familiar with MU Connect, you can make a lot of appointments across campus. This is informational for you as well. It will be in the materials that we send out after this presentation. So I'm not going to go through each step. I'm just letting you know that it's there and available to you. Your to-do list. If you have not already, we strongly encourage you to look at your log into your MyZoo, look at your student center and see what your outstanding to-do list items are, if you have any. It could be preventing us from packaging you with aid or giving you the best financial aid package if there are outstanding to-do list items. So that's one of the reasons why we're calling this out really quick and just making you aware of it. If you did not already know about it, please, please, please go out there and check those to-do list items so we can package you as soon as possible with the best financial aid package possible. To-do list items, just when you log into your MyZoo and your student center on the upper right-hand side, you're going to see a to-do list drop-down. Click that drop-down, click more. And when you get into those details for those outstanding items, people often call us and be like, I don't know what to do. I have this to-do list. If you click on those links, we are providing you specific instructions on exactly what to do for those to-do lists, oftentimes with documents included or links to documents of information that we need. So please go out there, click on those links and complete that information. And we'll be happy to get everything processed as quickly as possible for you. If you wait till closer to the term, more and more students are doing the same thing and things start to slow down just due to the heavy volume. So please go out early, get this stuff to us, and you'll be able to get that turned around a lot faster to get the best aid package possible. You also have the option to grant others access as a student to your information. Sometimes people put their parents or legal guardians in there. You could put other adults, you could give other adults or other people access to your information. But once you become a student with us, we can't talk to anyone else about your academic record without you giving us access. So just a FYI, this is here for you. It's here for you. You can get to it through Mizzou One. You can get through to your self-service, your student login through MyZoo. So it's here for you. I just wanted to call it out to you because please, 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 if you want us to be able to talk to your parents about your bill and your financial aid, we need permission to do so. Financial aid. We already talked about these. I've plugged them a couple times throughout the presentation, but there are 2 more webinars coming up. So making your Mizzou plan, using loans and other types of aid. We're going to go into much detail about other types of aid on April 7th. And then we're going to talk to aid options for non-residents, out-of-state Tigers on April 21st. Both of those Zoom webinars are going to be at 7 p.m. Central Time. And we would love to have you again. And that's really, that's the crux of our presentation. And just really quick, we're really happy that you joined us tonight. Our email is there, our phone's there, our office hours. Please make an appointment with us through MU Connect or call or email us. We're in the basement of Jesse Hall. And our social media, we oftentimes put out breaking information or quick updates that we need to get out that we want students to learn about and their families on our social media website. So that is what we have for you today. That is my last slide. And so I really appreciate you joining us. Remember, we are going to have this, this is recorded. We're going to send it out to you. You're going to have it and we're also going to have some FAQs with more details about some of the things we talked about and some of the questions that you asked. We couldn't get to every question in this 1 hour time slot, but I promise you we'll get you some answers from the questions that you submitted, or you can reach out to us directly. We'd love to chat with you. We'd love to help you through this process. So thanks for tuning in and go Tigers.